Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Fiber Broadband Association's Five for Breakfast. We're now in our 30th episode of 2025. And before we kick off, I'd like to thank Wesco, the platinum sponsor of Fiber for Breakfast. Well, a lot is going on in Washington, D.C. At NTI earlier this week, all 56 states and territories' initial proposals received the green light from NTI, allowing them to advance to the benefit of the bargain round, a critical step in the BEAD application process under the revised guidance. Final proposals are due to NTI by September 4th. Yesterday, NTI hosted a virtual public listening session titled Bolstering Data Center Growth, Resiliency, and Security. And the purpose of the listening session was to seek input from a wide range of stakeholders to inform an upcoming NTI report outlining the challenges and opportunities to data center growth, resiliency, and security. So I delivered brief remarks emphasizing the critical importance of access to fiber, empowering the next generation technologies. I really enjoyed Zayo's testimony where they explained how critical it is to have fiber off and on ramps for AI to rural communities to avoid what they call death loops, which is when a rural community are not able to participate in the AI future to lack of fiber connectivity. So in Congress, Ariel Roth is expected to be confirmed as soon as this morning as the NTI Administrator and Assistant Secretary of Commerce. We look forward to working with her as she takes on this new leadership role at NTI. At the FCC, they'll have their next open meeting tomorrow where commissioners will vote on a draft of their network modernization NPRM, notice of proposed rulemaking. FBA has been reviewing the draft for their members to assess its potential impact. Last week we held an amazing regional Fiber Connect workshop in Anchorage, Alaska. It's clear that Alaska is unlike any other state or territory in our nation. Alaska is twice the size of Texas, but only has a population of 740,000 people versus 30 million in Texas. Further, Alaska's topology is quite diverse with lots of islands, mountains, and tundra, not to mention a very short build window. We learned a lot from Thomas Lochner, the state's broadband director, who described the challenging topology and remoteness of the state's unserved and underserved locations. More importantly, we learned that in Alaska, communications are life and death. There's no golden hour for emergency rescues. And we greatly appreciate the warm reception received during our visit to the 49th state. We will continue our roadshow in the Great White North. We'll be in Toronto on Tuesday, August 19th. So we hopefully see you there. After Toronto, we'll be in Spokane on September, Scottsdale in October, Kansas City in November, and then we'll finish here in Palm Springs in December 8th and 9th for our premier member meeting. Today on Fiber Breakfast, our guest is Gaurav Juneja, the Chief Operating Officer at Consolidated Communications, to discuss Fidium's transforms New England's future with fiber. Before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to introduce David Norris from our team, who's going to walk us through some housekeeping items.
Thank you very much, Gary, and thank you to everyone who's joining us this morning. Good morning. Before I go over a few logistics, we'd like to once again thank our platinum sponsor, Fiber for Breakfast, Wesco. Now, as participants, you are in listen-only mode today. However, we want to hear from you. To ask a question, please type it into the question box, which is located in the lower left-hand side of your screen. We will host a Q&A session with our panelists at the end of today's presentation. This presentation is also being recorded and will be available on FBA's website within 24 to 48 hours, and you can find that recording in the Events tab under the Fiber for Breakfast drop-down option. Finally, at the conclusion of today's webinar, you'll be prompted to complete a brief feedback survey. If you could take a moment to do so, your responses really help us out, and we appreciate your input. And with that, I will hand things back over to Gary to once again get us started. Gary?
Thanks, David. Good morning. I'm Gary Bolton, the President and CEO of the Fiber Broadband Association. Last week on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest was Alisa Kennedy, the State Broadband and Digital Equity Director for Public Service Commission of Wisconsin, to discuss continuing to connect Wisconsin strategies for statewide broadband access. So Alyssa shared with us where they are with respect to their BEAD process and next steps for Wisconsin. So if you missed it, you can go to our website and watch the replay. Today on Fiber for Breakfast, our guest is Gaurav Juneja, the Chief Operating Officer at Consolidated Communications, is going to discuss how Fidium transforms New England's future with fiber. So G is the Chief Operating Officer at Consolidated, and oversees the Fidium consumer fiber business, including market development, product management, marketing, sales, call centers, customer experience, base management, as well as field operations and information technology, which supports enterprise. So basically, he does everything. And G joined the company in 2023 as president of Consolidated Consumer and Small Business Organization. Prior to joining the company, G served as executive vice president and GM for consumer and chief revenue officer at MetroNet, where he was responsible for building all consumer sales channels, marketing, product management, MDU, market expansion, customer care, and sales operation. As EVP of consumer at MetroNet, he led product management, customer care, and field marketing. Juneja also held leadership positions at Rise Broadband, Dish Networks, and RJ Group of Companies, a retailer for T-Mobile and Sprint, where he led consumer and SMB sales channels, field marketing, and overall go-to-market strategy. Gaurav has an MBA from Cornell University and a BA from Trinity College. So welcome, G, and for audience, please type in your questions to go, and we'll work those into the discussion. So with that, I will turn things over to G.
You bet. Gary, thank you. Pleasure to be here and really appreciate the opportunity for Consolidated and Fidium to share our story. So that said, I'll get right into it. This is an overview on Consolidated, and our fiber brand specifically within Consolidated is known as Fidium. So during this presentation, you will see me refer to our fiber business as Fidium. All of that to say, when you think about our core business, our mission at Consolidated is to bring broadband infrastructure to unserved and underserved communities throughout our footprint. And we truly believe that broadband infrastructure enables people to live, work, and thrive in communities, specifically underserved and unserved communities, just so they don't have to relocate into urban centers. So we're committed to the mission, and what you will see throughout this presentation is that we have partnered with state broadband offices, cities, municipalities to again take broadband infrastructure to these unserved communities. Consolidated has three different business segments: consumer, commercial, and carrier. So we will not go into a town or a city just with one business segment or one customer segment. We will go in with all three. And that again goes back to our mission of providing critical broadband infrastructure for rural communities to thrive. So a consumer business, we have 2.6 million passes, as you'll see on this map. We have 2.6 million passes across the country, which is a combination of both copper and fiber. We have upgraded more than 50%, 54% to be specific, of our plant to fiber. So that's currently the case at 1.4 million passes, with a long-term goal of being an 80% plus fiberized company, which means that we will have more than 2 million passes on fiber by the end of 2027 or somewhere in the range of 2028. That's our story on consumer fiber. We also, again, as I mentioned, have a very deep and thriving commercial business and have a very deep and thriving carrier business. And this goes back to our philosophy of, if rural communities need to thrive, we don't just take our residential or our consumer business there. We go out to small businesses, we go to hospitals, municipalities, schools, and we provide commercial services along with carrier circuits. And 80% of our fiber circuits are unique in the towns that we serve. So with that said, I'll talk about our evolution. Back in 2020, only 11% of our footprint was covered in fiber. When we launched Fidium Fiber as our fiber brand in 2021, and we have an investor. We had investors at the time. We were a publicly traded company. In December of 2024, we went private. So our investor and our partner, Searchlight Capital, they were a great partner even when we were a public company. But since we've been private, again, as I mentioned, we've upgraded more than 50% of our plant to fiber with the goal to be at 80% or 80% plus. And when you really think about our long-term vision, which again is very much in play, we are going to have a future-proof infrastructure, which is not only complemented with fiber technology, but a seamless customer experience. And we truly believe that we have put customers now at the heart of every single thing that we do. We've digitized the customer experience. We've simplified processes. We've rationalized the product portfolio. All of that to say, we truly want to be a next-gen fiber company, and we're well on our way. Our strategy is very simple. It's hard to execute the strategy, but when I think about the three legs of the stool on the strategy, again, as I mentioned, number one, it's about having the fastest and the most reliable network in the markets that we serve. And again, the markets that we serve are more unserved and underserved. We want to, and we are delivering an exceptional customer experience. And that's not just talking to a customer care representative or talking to a tech support representative. It's really a culture across the organization where we are customer first. And that just means we put the customer, even in a legal contract, even in a vendor contract, we want to make sure we're always thinking about the customer experience. And then last but not the least, we have significantly, as a telco, we have significantly simplified our operations. And in the operations, I specifically am talking about people. We're hiring people that bring value and that, again, will enable this exceptional customer experience. I'm talking about processes, dramatically simplifying them, and for both time to serve the customer and for cost to serve the customer. And then I'm talking about products. We've simplified our product portfolio. So when we go into a city or a town, again, we're going in with a multi-prong and a multi-customer approach. Residential customers, small and medium businesses, enterprise businesses, and customers who want their own dedicated circuits. So we've simplified the product portfolio to cater to all different customer segments and to do it expeditiously. Really, when I think about our strengths at Consolidated that we have built, it comes down to 5 things. We believe we have a unique and natural asset, and I'll talk about that. We have a proven construction engine, and again, as I mentioned, 1.4 million, which is 54% of our footprint, is already covered in fiber, with 80% or higher being the goal. We have a proven customer acquisition engine. So this is an execution muscle that we have built over the last 2 years, and it continues to get stronger year over year. Where I've talked about the exceptional customer experience, and I'll validate that through some NPS scores. And then last but not the least, again, as I mentioned, we truly are overlaying our strong consumer business with a very, very robust and thriving commercial and carrier business. So when I think about us having a unique and natural asset, 70% of our fiber build is happening in northern New England. And in northern New England, 90% of our plant is aerial. With the aerial plant and the fact that we have joint ownership of these poles, we have unencumbered access to these poles. And because of our commercial business and our carrier business, we have a large core dense fiber network, which is the middle mile network. So not only do we have aerial infrastructure and access to our poles for our last mile network, we also have a large core dense network for our middle mile network. And as a result, what that gives us is predictability of speed to build and cost to build. We could literally work with a town and choose and decide to build a town and actually have it built within 4 to 6 months. And there's predictability of speed and cost versus, typically for anybody else to go and build that town, it would historically take them anywhere in the range of 12 to 18 months, especially for an aerial plant. All of that to say, we believe we give customers predictability, and we believe we can get into a town, choose to build a town and build it fast and build it very economically. What that then gives us is a robust fiber construction engine. And I think the big thing to point out here on this slide, and my big takeaway in this slide is, if you look at what we built in 2022, we built 400,000 fiber passes, in the second year of our fiber build. And again, from my experience or my past experience as a fiber overbuilder, it takes a long time to build 400,000 passes in one given year. All of this to prove that we have the capability, we have the speed to build a lot of fiber passes, and we're going to continue to do that. And as I mentioned at the beginning of the presentation, that 2 million, we're going to be a fiber provider with 2 million passes that will be fiberized across our 8-state footprint, with 70% of it in northern New England. So, the question is, with northern New England, what have we done? And when I think about Northern New England, we have specifically partnered with the CUDs in Vermont, and we've partnered with the city, the county, and the state broadband office in Maine and New Hampshire. And again, we have taken service to these unserved and underserved communities, where typically fiber infrastructure would be hard to take infrastructure to. We have worked with those city and state broadband offices to take our infrastructure to these towns. And I'm incredibly proud of this. The reason being is I truly believe that rural communities are, compared to the larger urban centers, are considered the underdog. And I truly believe when I think about the best stories or the most inspiring stories when it comes to communities or comes to sports or teams, it all starts with being the underdog. Point being is we're providing critical infrastructure. We're doing it in conjunction with these state and broadband offices. And we're incredibly proud to be the provider of choice in these towns where people don't need to relocate to bigger centers, to bigger urban centers, to realize what I believe is their American dream, which is to get their dream job, to get a quality education, to get access to healthcare, to get opportunity. They don't have to move to larger towns because of the fiber infrastructure that we provide. And I want to sincerely thank the states that have partnered with us and the cities and the counties that have partnered with us to provide this critical infrastructure to these rural communities. So, next up is providing critical infrastructure is one thing, but then providing an exceptional customer experience is another thing. And this is the execution muscle that we have built. Our NPS, our combined NPS score across all our customer interactions is at a 45. That is dramatically higher than the cable cos. And quite candidly, I believe that we're just scratching the surface. I truly believe that our goal is to be at 70 for NPS, and that is very possible with some of the initiatives that we are undertaking. We have something called the Fidium promise. It's all about making sure that you can service customers expeditiously on installs and on repairs. It's making sure that when you provide service to customers, that service is certified by a technician. It's really making sure that your IT stack and your experience is fully digitized. So when customers call you for anything, there's a single pane of glass where the records are kept in one place and they have immediate access to everything that they need. All of that to say, we truly believe that from an NPS standpoint, we're already beating the competition, and we believe we're scratching the surface. I'm sorry. So we talked a lot about the consumer business, NPS. I've talked about how our commercial and our carrier business is a really strong overlay. In fact, if anything, Consolidated actually built that business on commercial. So what you will see over here, and as I mentioned at the beginning, 80% of our routes are unique. And on the carrier business, and then when I think about our commercial business, the average lifespan of a commercial customer in our footprint is 16 years. So all of this to say, we've got a thriving commercial and carrier business. We take our commercial and carrier business into these communities as we launch consumer. So we have a multi-pronged approach, and we're doing this for the benefit of the community. And obviously, we're doing this for the benefit of the states that we provide our service in. And then the last thing I'll say is it's great to be recognized. Since we've gone on this mission back in 2021, we have been recognized by entities or institutions such as CNET that have given us awards and accolades for the service that we've provided in states like New Hampshire and Maine, again, going back to Northern New England. We've been recognized by the US Broadband Office, again, for these public-private partnerships. So far in the last 4 years, we have partnered with these states and received up to $225 million in subsidy to go and take our service into these unserved and underserved communities. And we've been given accolades by the states. We've also been, many of our employees or our associates have also been recognized for outstanding awards for service that they've done in their communities, such as the award that you can see over there for Outstanding Women in Business. All of this to say, we're not done yet. We have a long way to go, but we're well on our way on this journey to provide service to underserved communities in Northern New England. The last thing I'll say is clearly our mission is to provide service to unserved and underserved communities and enrich how they live, work, and thrive in their communities. And our vision is to be America's favorite fiber provider. And that vision can only be realized if not only by providing our service, but again, it goes back to the customer experience and really making sure that we can delight our customers across every interaction. So we clearly have a mission, which we're executing. We clearly have our vision, which we're working towards. And I'm just incredibly fortunate and excited, Gary, to be presenting our story at Consolidated and Fidium with the rest of the fiber community.
Well, gee, I mean, you had tremendous success at Metronet, and again, it looks like Consolidated is just rocketing. Can you talk a little bit on your slide 6? You had talked about you had Fidium states and then some operating states. What's the difference?
Great question. I'll pull that back to the slide. Give me one second. So our Fidium states, Gary, are the ones in green, and that's primarily where we are converting a majority of our, or upgrading a majority of our copper plant to fiber. The rest of the operating states, we have some fiber in those states, but they're primarily our copper states and our voice, our states where we have parts of voice service, which we're absolutely fully committed to. So that's the difference between the operating states, which is primarily copper and parts, versus the fiber states where we're converting most of our copper plant to fiber.
So do you see in the future that those would become Fidium states as well, or how do you see those?
We're evaluating that today. Gary, we're not, I can't commit to that today. We're evaluating that. Our goal is, we clearly have an opportunity to convert 2 million of our 2.6 million in the states highlighted in green. And then once we get to, and we've evaluated that based on the opportunity, based on our partnership with the state broadband offices and with the BEAD opportunity, that's ahead of us also. And then once we're done with that evaluation, then we'll get to the states in blue.
So Searchlight, that's Ajit Pai, right? Back before he went back into the association business. But so what was the motivation to take Consolidated private?
So a couple of different things. Number one is we already, Searchlight was already, they already owned 35% when we were a publicly traded company. They owned 35% of our shares. And again, as I mentioned, since 2021, and they were a great partner, not just in terms of capital infusion, but also in terms of expertise. They have great financial partners and great financial expertise and great operating expertise also through their operating partners. So we gained a lot of insight and a lot of knowledge from them, and we were executing our business, strategically planning with them. We wanted to accelerate our fiber expansion into the states that we've referenced and talked about, and we believe that with a simplified capital structure of being private, it would really it would help us accelerate the fiber expansion. And then since we've been private, so it was really about A, simplifying the capital structure, B, is the operating experience that they were also bringing to the table, and we wanted more of that. And then C is, since we've gone private, we've already seen the benefits of being a private company, where we've gone through a round of ABS funding and had a very successful outcome back in May, which is again further helping us accelerate our fiber expansion. And candidly, it was just drawing a more deeper partnership with Searchlight, who we believed again from the first place back in 2021 was already a great partner.
So you and I have discussed that the private equity, it's really a robust environment for private equity, and private equity's raised more money in the first half of 2025 than all of last year for broadband infrastructure. So why is investing in fiber so attractive to private equity?
Yeah, I think it comes down to I can't speak for the other PE firms out there. I think it is I think it's an attractive investment. Going back to my days at Metronet, now obviously it's at Consolidated and Fidium. I think it's attractive because your cost of based on your cost of capital, and then the fiber deployment and the free cash flow that you can gain, and more so the customer benefit that you can provide, and then the free cash flow that you can gain. I think there's obviously margin over there for the PE firms. But putting the financial piece aside, I think it's really about providing critical infrastructure. It goes back to the mission, and that's what really drew me in the first place to Searchlight and to Consolidated back in 2023, which is they were very mission oriented. And I believe that when you have a PE firm that is thinking about financial returns, of course, but is also thinking about the mission, which is providing critical infrastructure to unserved and underserved communities, and we're very specific and very targeted about who we want to serve. And then number two is in addition to the mission, they really focus on the customer experience. And I think that when we think about the industry, we're all focusing on fiber, which is great, but then there's also a fair amount of customer fatigue in terms of the experience that customers have with the incumbents. So when I found a PE firm like Searchlight that is focusing on obviously the financial returns, as I mentioned, but is more so focusing on the mission of providing critical infrastructure, and then focusing on the vision of being the best provider from a customer experience standpoint, I think that's what makes PE firms really thrive, and that's what's making us with Searchlight really thrive as partners.
Yeah, I mean, Searchlight, great partner. So it also, we're starting to see the beginning of a market consolidation cycle in the fiber industry. How does that fit into your market expansion strategy?
We are. The good news is we're fully committed to our 80% fiberization plan, and we're well funded for that through both debt and equity. So that's obviously good news. Anything that we do on M&A will be incremental. So in other words, if we can get to 90% fiber through M&A, we'll be fully committed to do so. It has to make sense for us strategically, any M&A. In other words, we have to be able to gain operating leverage. It has to be contiguous with should be hopefully contiguous with our footprint. We have operating leverage. We have we can gain better labor utilization, better marketing scale. If it makes sense for us, I think we'll definitely entertain that. But at the moment, we're fully committed to our 80% fiber plan. That does not include any M&A. Any M&A in the future will be incremental to our plan.
So you mentioned free cash flow. So with the One Big Beautiful Bill Act, the 100% bonus depreciation, that's going to free up a lot of free cash flow for you guys. Is that so? Are you going to be putting 15 to 20% of that back into fiber investment, or how do you see that?
We absolutely are. For us, this is all about the flywheel. We want to be able to reinvest all our proceeds into the fiber build. So we will invest our proceeds back into fiber build, back into enabling a better customer experience. And number three is enabling a much better employee experience within the company. Those are the three things that we're deeply investing in.
All right, we got a bunch of audience questions. I'm going to start with our good friend, Christine. Your plans are to reach 80% of your locations with fiber. What are you planning for the last 20%, and how are you going to deal with carrier of last resort requirements for those 20%?
Sure. So we will continue to provide our copper infrastructure for the remaining 20%. And the reason why we can't, the reason why we've chosen 80% is because we have looked at our build across these 8 states, and we've selected how we can ubiquitously take our coverage to this 80%. The last 20% becomes somewhat cost prohibitive, and that's where we're working with the state broadband offices. We're working on BEAD and different opportunities to still be able to take fiber, if we can, opportunistically to the other 20%. But our goal is to continue to service the other 20% with our copper network.
And then clarification, did you say $225 million in subsidies over 5 years?
Over the last 5 years, yes. Yes.
All right, now here's another good question. How are you managing your workforce demand, specifically with engineering instruction, given the increased need for these resources? What have you accomplished in the number of passings per year what you've accomplished is impressive. So how are you dealing with the workforce?
Yeah, we have, again, as I mentioned, we're deeply investing in our build, our technology stack, to provide a simplified and better customer experience. And number three is our employee experience. So we are augmenting in the engineering and construction teams, we're augmenting our internal teams, but then we're also contracting out. And when we contract out, both construction and engineering, we're providing commitments. And because we're fully committed to this build and it's well funded, we can actually provide those commitments in terms of longevity of work along with a dedicated rate. So we're investing in our internal teams through learning and development opportunities and guaranteed work. And then we're augmenting through contractor work that, again, we're guaranteeing the work based on the fact that we've got a dedicated build that we're fully committed to.
There's a bunch of questions. So hopefully you can get back to these folks afterwards. But gee, I've always been so impressed with your work, and I really appreciate your light talk at our conference last year. It was amazing. And thank you guys. Thank you for spending your time with us today and sharing your insight and knowledge, and really excited for what you guys are doing with Fidium Fiber. I want to thank everybody for joining us today and look forward to getting back together next Wednesday with Jim Martin, the president and CEO of CityNet, to discuss bridging the divide in the Mountain State, CityNet's role in rural broadband expansion. So thanks for that. And I also just want to shout out to all the state broadband offices. Just know you guys are working your ass off to September 4th. So we're thinking about you every day, and appreciate all the hard work you guys are doing. Thanks, everyone.